Welcome to True Crime Stories Time, where we dive into the darkest mysteries, chilling crimes, and haunting cases that will leave you questioning just how well you know the world around you. Tonight's story is one of the most disturbing disappearances in American history. A young family went camping on Labor Day weekend, but they never came home. What began as a simple holiday in the Oregon wilderness turned into one of the state's most haunting unsolved mysteries. This is the story of the Cowden family, the family that vanished without a trace. Richard Cowden was only 28 years old in 1974, but by all accounts, he was already a man defined by responsibility. A tall, hard-working father with a calm demeanor, Richard spent his days as a truck driver, providing for the small family he had built in White City, Oregon. Friends described him as dependable, the kind of man who didn't complain, who carried the quiet strength of someone who put his family first. Always. His wife, Belinda, just 22, had married young, but she embraced the role of wife and mother with remarkable devotion. Where Richard was stoic and reserved, Belinda brought warmth and tenderness. She was described by those who knew her as gentle but strong. Her days filled with caring for their son, David, and their new baby girl, Melissa, who had been born just that April. David, at only 5 years old, was already full of energy and curiosity. He was a boy who loved being outdoors, collecting sticks, exploring dirt paths, and asking endless questions. He looked up to his father, following him around like a shadow whenever he could. And then there was Melissa, only 5 months old, still cradled in the innocence of infancy. She represented the future, the hope of a young family just beginning to write its story. Together, they were ordinary in the most beautiful sense of the word. They were not rich, not famous, not connected to any world of danger. They were simply a young American family, living quietly, working hard, and raising their children. For Richard, the Labor Day weekend in 1974 was a break from the long days on the road. For Belinda, it was a chance to take the children into the fresh mountain air. For little David, it was an adventure. His father promised him fishing, and David could not wait to cast his line. And so, on the morning of August 30th, 1974, the Cowdens packed their essentials into their 1956 Ford pickup truck. Camping gear, food, a tent, baby supplies, and even the family's loyal basset hound. They drove south into the Siskiyou Mountains, near the tiny community of Copper, Oregon. Their destination was Carberry Creek, a popular camping spot known for its quiet beauty and fishing streams. No one could have guessed it then, but this trip would mark the last time the Cowden family was seen alive together. As they set up camp that Friday afternoon, nothing seemed unusual. Other campers later reported that the family looked happy. Richard helping little David, Belinda rocking the baby. It was a picture of peace. A family savoring one last summer weekend. But within 72 hours, that peace would shatter. The Cowden family's campsite sat nestled among tall pines near Carberry Creek, a rugged area about 25 miles from their home. In 1974, the land was wilder, quieter. The trails wound through steep hillsides, and the creek carved its way through rocks and moss, providing the perfect backdrop for a weekend of family camping. Richard picked the site carefully. He wasn't reckless. He wanted a place close to water, close to other campers, but still private enough for his young family to enjoy some peace. With the tent pitched, the campfire crackling, and the scent of pine needles in the air, it must have felt like an escape from the stress of everyday life. That first night, the Cowdens blended in with the rhythm of the wilderness. Other campers saw them fishing by the creek, little David holding his father's hand as he tried to cast. Belinda nursed baby Melissa, sitting on a blanket near the fire. Their basset hound sniffed curiously at squirrels and shadows, his floppy ears catching the last golden light of evening. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing suggested that danger was near. On Saturday morning, August 31st, Richard and David drove into the small town of Copper, just a short distance from the campsite. At 9 a.m., they stopped at the local general store to buy milk. The store clerk later recalled the scene clearly. Richard appeared calm, and David carried the jug proudly as they left. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Cowdens alive. By Saturday evening, neighbors camping nearby noticed the Cowdens back at their site. The family seemed content, enjoying the quiet evening. Richard was preparing dinner, Belinda tending to the baby. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Sunday, September 1st, passed quietly. No one reported anything unusual. But by Monday, Labor Day itself, a disturbing silence hung over the campsite. When the Cowdens failed to show up at Richard's parent house that Monday evening for a planned dinner, alarm bells began to ring. Richard's mother knew her son well. He was punctual, responsible, never careless about family plans. The Cowdens' absence was not just unusual, it was unthinkable. By nightfall, worry overcame hesitation. Richard's parents drove out toward Carberry Creek to check on them. What they found was not the scene of a family enjoying their last holiday meal, but a chilling tableau that suggested something had gone terribly wrong. The Cowden campsite looked eerily undisturbed, almost frozen in time. Richard's truck was parked exactly where it should have been. The family's belongings, fishing poles, cooking supplies, baby gear, were still laid out on the picnic table. Food sat partially prepared, as if someone had stepped away mid-meal. Belinda's purse and baby supplies were untouched. Even the family's basset hound was tied up near the campsite, hungry and whimpering. But the family themselves were nowhere. It looked like they had simply walked away for a moment, intending to return. Yet hours passed, and the woods remained silent. There were no footprints leading away, no notes left behind, no signs of panic, just absence. Richard's parents alerted law enforcement immediately. By nightfall, the campsite was crawling with officers, flashlights cutting through the trees. But as the hours stretched into the early morning, one terrifying truth became clear. The Cowden family had vanished without a trace. The disappearance of an entire family shook the small Oregon community to its core. By dawn on Tuesday, September 3rd, the search for the Cowdens became one of the largest in the state's history at the time. Hundreds of volunteers poured into the area. Police units, helicopters, bloodhounds, and even the Oregon National Guard were mobilized. Searchers combed miles of wilderness, scouring trails, riverbanks, and abandoned cabins. At first, hope remained. Perhaps the family had wandered off and gotten lost in the rugged terrain. Maybe Richard had injured himself on a hike, and the others had stayed by his side, waiting for help. The wilderness was unforgiving, but survival was possible. But as hours turned into days, the optimism began to fade. No footprints, no broken branches, no pieces of clothing. Nothing at all was found. Even more disturbing, there were no signs of struggle at the campsite. If foul play had occurred, how had an entire family been taken without leaving evidence behind? As the search stretched into weeks, frustration grew.
The forest was scoured again and again, but the land kept its secret. By the end of September, the search effort had slowed, though not stopped. The Cowden family was simply gone. For months, rumors swirled. Some whispered about cults operating in the wilderness. Others speculated about serial killers, escaped convicts, or even drug traffickers who stumbled across the family. Theories multiplied, but answers did not. And then, in the spring of 1975, 7 long months after the Cowdens vanished, the woods gave up their secret. On April 12, 1975, 2 gold prospectors exploring the rugged terrain near Carberry Creek stumbled upon a sight that froze them in terror. In a small clearing, hidden in the underbrush, they discovered the remains of a man, a woman, and a small child. Nearby, in a hollowed-out tree trunk, the body of an infant was found. The Cowden family had finally been found. The remains confirmed what many had feared but few had wanted to admit. Richard, Belinda, David, and baby Melissa had been murdered. The details were horrifying. Richard had been bound and shot. Belinda and David were also killed violently, though the passage of time made it difficult to determine the exact cause. Baby Melissa's tiny body had been hidden, as though someone wanted her death concealed even more. The scene raised more questions than it answered. Why had the bodies been moved so far from the campsite, 7 miles into rugged terrain? Why were they concealed with such care? And most disturbing of all, who could commit such an atrocity? The discovery reignited the investigation, but the mystery only deepened. Police quickly turned their attention to a familiar name, Dwain Lee Little. Little was a convicted murderer who had been paroled earlier that same year, after serving time for the brutal killing of a teenage girl in 1964. He was known to haunt the area around Carberry Creek, and investigators soon learned that he had been seen in the vicinity of the Cowden campsite around the time of their disappearance. In fact, a local family camping nearby reported seeing Little and his parents near Carberry Creek that same weekend. Little's violent history, combined with his suspicious presence, made him the prime suspect. But suspicion wasn't enough. Physical evidence was scarce. Forensic science in 1974 lacked the sophistication of today. DNA testing didn't exist, and the remote location of the bodies meant valuable clues had degraded. Though investigators pressed hard, Little was never formally charged with the Cowden murders. He was later convicted of other crimes, including violent assaults, and remains behind bars. But officially, the Cowden family case is unsolved. Other theories have surfaced over the years. Some speculate that the family stumbled across illegal drug operations in the mountains and were silenced. Others suggest the involvement of multiple attackers, given the difficulty of subduing 4 victims at once without leaving obvious evidence behind. But the truth has never been proven. The Cowden family murders remain one of Oregon's most infamous unsolved cases. For the residents of White City, the tragedy never faded. Friends and relatives were left to wonder how such violence could touch such an ordinary family. The image of the abandoned campsite, food half prepared, baby supplies left behind, continues to haunt those who study the case. It is a snapshot of innocence interrupted, of lives cut short without explanation. Decades later, the case still raises painful questions. Could modern forensic methods solve it today? Was Dwain Lee Little truly the killer, or was he merely a convenient suspect? And perhaps most chilling, was someone else responsible, someone who never faced justice? For true crime researchers and investigators, the Cowden family represents both the fragility of safety and the stubborn endurance of mystery. The story of the Cowdens is not just about crime, it's about the vulnerability of family, the unpredictability of evil, and the scars left behind when justice remains out of reach. One Labor Day weekend, a young family set out to enjoy the wilderness. They carried with them fishing poles, food, and dreams for the future. Instead, their lives ended in violence, and their memory lives on as a haunting reminder of how quickly ordinary joy can turn into unexplainable horror. Nearly 50 years later, the Cowden case is still unsolved. What do you think happened to the Cowdens that weekend in 1974? Was Dwain Lee Little truly responsible, or is the real killer still unknown? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more true crime stories that uncover the darkest and most baffling mysteries, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. Because sometimes, the scariest stories are the ones that remain unanswered.